This is the special meeting of the Court Reporters Board.
They're starting.
Thank you. This is a special meeting of the Court Reporters Board. It's Wednesday, December the 7th, 2016. It's 2:32 p.m. We are doing video conferencing in the following sites: Department of Consumer Affairs Headquarters, 1747 North Market Boulevard in Sacramento, in the first floor hearing room. We're also in the Crom Court Reporting, 401 West A Street, Suite 750 in San Diego. And lastly, we're in the Bureau of Automotive Repair, 16735 Von Carmen Avenue, Suite 100, Irvine, California. Could you do a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. Hurt.
Present.
Ms. Crom.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Lisinski.
Present.
Ms. Nocella.
Present.
Ms. O'Neill.
Present.
Quorum reached.
Thank you. We'd like to remind everyone that the proceedings of the board meeting are being recorded and webcasted, as well as being conducted, as I said, in the 3 locations. It's requested that anyone wishing to speak come forward as they are recognized. It's welcome but not required that the speakers identify themselves. Our first agenda item is finding the necessity for the special meeting, Government Code Section 11125.4C, and our Executive Director will present that agenda item.
There is, in order to call a special meeting, we need to, as a board, find that delaying this meeting for the 30-day notice or the next regularly scheduled meeting would cause a substantial hardship either on us or it would be, if we didn't do it, it would be in violation of protecting the public interest. And so I'm just pointing out for the board that if we had waited to the next meeting, which is in January, or if we had done a 30-day notice, we would have effectively been denying the request for the retest, the immediate retest. Because of the timing, if we don't go forward today, it will not be possible to even do it. We'll just frankly be out of time.
In that finding for the board, they should understand that we have to find substantial hardship on the body, as it's been described, or that immediate action is required to protect the public interest. And there needs to be a 2/3 vote in order for this meeting to continue. Do board members have any questions about the finding that has to be made?
Just a quick correction. It should be a 10-day notice, not 30-day notice. It's a 10-day notice. Normally, it's a 10-day notice, not 30-day notice.
So in this case, we got together very quickly, and it's a special meeting because it's under that time. Do board members have any questions? No?
No.
Okay. So with that,
About the board members presently.
they haven't responded. Board Member Crom, do you have any questions about
No
the
questions.
findings? Okay. Nocella, board member?
Nope.
No.
No questions.
So moving forward, we need to have a motion. There's a suggested motion in our agenda packet. If a board member would like to start us off so we can begin the meeting.
This is Carrie Nocella. I move that the board finds that there is necessity to convene a special meeting to address the issue of scheduling an additional examination because of a delay in a meeting would cause a substantial hardship on the board due to the pressing need and the time involved in scheduling such an exam.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I second.
Okay, are there any public comments on this item or any additional comments that board members would like to make? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Ms. Crom.
Yes.
Ms. Lisinski.
Yes.
Ms. Nocella.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Yes.
Ms. Hurt.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank all the board members for gathering on such short notice and rearranging your schedules to hear this request. I really deeply appreciate all your efforts. The board, everyone should know, the board's very invested in the court reporting in California for consumers. And I also want to thank the staff for the accelerated review of tests, gathering information, and communicating with the public. It's deeply appreciated. And also, of course, the public that's here. We have quite a few folks, and we want to hear your testimony on the matter. I'd like to just quickly also say, there are a lot of folks that ask me, why are you having this meeting? And as the chair, there are two reasons that I thought was very important, and I want folks to know. One, the fact that possibly this board policy was unknowingly violated, and probably more importantly is the board's fiduciary duty related to any large expenditure. And with an additional test, there would be a lot of money that would have to be put forth. So I thought it really necessitated and was appropriate for everyone to sound in on whether we should move forward. And moving forward prior to a scheduled test in March or not. And I really would like the perspective of court reporters, public members, bar members, everybody to kind of sound in and translate this experience into a good decision. So thank you for giving me time to start that off. Let's now go on to agenda item 2, which is the main event for everybody, which is the request for the emergency retest of skills portions of the CSR license exam. Yvonne, do you have a report that you'd like to start off with?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Hurt. I just want to kind of go over the background quickly. During the setup of the November test, a decision was made to change the seating order of the readers of the exam. That was intended to make it easier for the questioning, reporting the questioning of the proceeding. However, it has come to our attention that there is actual board policy that sets out the order that the speakers will be, and because of the policy, the schools are teaching that setup, apparently that setup only, because the students were not able to make the change with the change in the order, the seating chart. And it is a violation of policy. Since that time, one of the schools has come forward on behalf of several schools offering their facility in order to put on an emergency retest of the license exam as quickly as possible in advance of the March meeting. The policy itself and the ramifications is really not at issue today. All of that will be addressed at the January board meeting. That's January 27th. It will be held in Sacramento. I just want to lay out for the board that today the single item that you are considering is the request for the immediate retest. So it's basically a yes or no direction to staff at the end of the day. And we're here to answer questions as far as what that means logistically. And if people are wanting to talk to address that, we have the public comment available.
Thank you, Ms. Fenner. Does the board have any questions now? Does the board have any questions based upon what they've heard thus far?
I have one question. This is Rosalie in San Diego. If obviously the policy, there was an issue as far as how the speakers sat, but is there anything in our policy regarding where the location of a test can be taken? Can it be taken at a school?
There is no policy.
Thank you.
Okay, any other, yes.
Do you have statistics on this exam and the results, and how can you compare those with previous exam results?
Yes, the overall pass rate was 7%. So that is the lowest that it's been. I think the previous low mark was 11%. The most significant part of the statistics are the amount of people that turned in an incomplete test, basically said, don't grade this, and just check themselves out of the test. So they didn't produce a transcript. That was significantly higher than it has been in past tests. If you take those incompletes out and just do the statistics based on the people that typed up the test, that brings the pass rate to 10%, which is still low, but is in line with the lowest that it has been before. But again, the previous pass rates would be an overall pass rate, including the people that turned in incomplete tests.
In our staff report, Ms. Finner, you outlined the different costs that would be involved for this test. Could you just repeat that for the public?
Yes. So if we were going to do it as we normally do, which is to contract with a hotel, then we would be looking at well, it's a range, and it's quite a significant range because it really varies based on how many hotel rooms are picked up. So in Los Angeles, if we were to hold the test at a hotel in Los Angeles, the range would be from $13,000 to $32,000. That means we'll contract for $32,000, assuming that nobody will spend the night. We don't pick up a single hotel room. It typically would be in the range of $13,000. That's the actual numbers that it has been in the past. If we hold it in Sacramento, that range is $5,900 to $14,000. Again, we would contract for it at $14,000, assuming that we would pick up 0 hotel rooms. And then if we picked up the maximum number or a typical number, then the actual cost would be in the range of $5,900.
Thank you.
Ms. Fenner, how long does it take to prepare a test? And what is involved in that preparation?
The actual preparation of the test itself, dictation material based on actual transcripts is counted out so that it's 200 words a minute, and then there's a syllabic density that it has to be counted with. It's 1.3 to 1.8 syllables per section. So that has to be counted out. So that's developed by working court reporters and then counted out to be in accordance with policy. It's time consuming, but it's not going to be the part that would say, no, we can't get that test prepared in time.
Ms. Finner, another question. If a request was granted, what type of timeline would we be looking at? The soonest that...
What I'd like to do is call on our licensing analyst, Kim Kale. Kim, for many years, has been the one that does the hands-on of this test. And we sat down and talked about what the difference would be. I mean, normally we have 30 days, for example, for a deadline. And so we explored, if we had to, what is the very, very fastest that staff could expedite the actual logistics of the application process in order to make this test happen. And so because she does it on a daily basis, I would ask her to kind of run the board through the very minimum that we would need to have that happen.
Hi. So I was looking at the time frame, and if we were to send out a special application along with the test results, if we had that mailed out by December 16th, give them time to mailing and receiving, and then have them be returned to the office no later than December 30th. And if I put all my other work on hold, that I could probably have those applications processed within a week, and then the notice is mailed out.
So that would make it to...
Mid-January.
So you broke up a little bit, Kim. Did you say mid to late January?
Yeah, around mid-January.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board?
Yes. As far as the logistics of getting a hotel facility for the test, what is the length of that process?
We checked with the contracts department, with the Department of Consumer Affairs, and they said that with proper justification, which I think that we can show, that they would be able to help us put a contract together within a week to 10 days. So it would be well within the time, I mean, we would start working on that immediately, but the longer process is getting the results out, getting the applications back in, getting the candidates scheduled, and the notices mailed back out.
And that would all occur by mid-January?
That would be the very earliest that that would happen.
In light of the holidays as well?
Yes,
I'm
I
sorry,
put
in
those
light of the holidays as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what to say to that. That usually does slow down because people are not at desks. I mean, it's more difficult to get people to commit and get signatures and what have you. I don't want to make that a deal breaker necessarily, but it is a consideration.
And this is Rosalie, may I ask, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just going to ask if there were any other questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, the school that made the offer to host the test, is that Northern California or Southern California?
That's Sage College in Moreno Valley.
Okay, thank you.
And I have
So-
a question. If this is,
Go
oh,
ahead. No, go ahead.
is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Ned.
This is Carrie Nocella. So if the board were to proceed and approve the immediate test retake, would Sage College be the only location that we would explore, or would there be 2 locations? I know I'm putting the cart before the horse, but would that,
Yeah, I don't know of other facilities, other schools, what they have in terms of facility, if they are large enough to handle 100 test takers at the same time.
South Coast can handle it too.
So we have the owner of South Coast here offering her facility as well.
Downey could do it too.
And Downey is saying they could do it as well. So we have 3 offers.
So Yvonne, this is Elizabeth. My question is there a requirement that this exam be held in Northern California? Because the previous exam was, is there any issue about north versus south? I don't know.
If it were a regularly scheduled one, yes. But this is an emergency retest and there are no policies in place for this. So if the board is trying to replicate the test, then it would be in Sacramento. But if they were trying to expedite it and had a reason for it to be in Southern California, that would be up to the board.
and this is a question for Fred and maybe for Ms. Fenner, but I understand that there is no policy that prohibits us from going to a school to issue the test. In my professional experience, I have been in situations where state agencies have not been permitted to accept, I don't want to say gifts, but accept free locations, free of charge, because it's a state agency. Fred, can we legally accept an offer like that?
I mean, given that the board does have a role in approving the school status in terms of being offering shorthand reporting programs, I'd like to research the issue a little bit more. I don't see anything in the policy about that. However, I do have a concern that there may be a potential conflict if the exams were to take place at a school.
This is Board Member Hurt. It seems to me that that is the foundation of whether we can, or a large part of whether we say an emergency test can happen, because of the costs associated and the thought that we can cut them by working with the schools. How long will it take you to research something like that?
I should be able to get an answer to you by the end of this week.
We have done it in the past at a school.
The written test only,
No, it was the examination. Was that South Coast?
not the dictation.
Could we wait with public
Well,
comments,
that was
please,
fair.
until you're called upon? I appreciate the audience having more facts for us, but let's hold on until that time period comes.
And forgive me, but Fred, if you can research two issues. One, I understand you're raising a separate issue of conflict, which you just raised. My question is really around, is the agency permitted to accept the value of what we would have otherwise paid to a hotel? Are we, like the $15,000 hypothetically, are we permitted legally to accept the $15,000 value as a gift on behalf of, to the agency?
Okay, so I'm
And
assuming
if
that
yes, how do we do that?
I'm assuming that in essence the board would not be paying any type of compensation to the school in return for usage of these facilities, correct?
I'm sorry, Fred, you were
So in essence,
completely
the
breaking up.
board will be receiving the facilities for free for the examination. Am I correct in
Well, nothing has been
No,
established
I'm sorry.
yet, but-
Assuming in that scenario, that in
Yes.
essence the school would be offering its space and facilities for free for the board to administer the exam. Correct?
That's one of the suggestions.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I will. I'll put that. I will research that.
Okay. We have another question, yes.
Well, I have another comment, and maybe this will go into what Fred's looking at also, but I have a real hesitation in having it at a school because of the test. If people that don't go to that school don't pass, then they can say, well, they had the home court advantage. These people passed because they're familiar with the school. So I'm a little concerned about creating another problem.
I'm sorry. We can't hear Sacramento at all. It's just like every third syllable.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have a concern about having a test at a school facility. In essence, because of what you could call a home court advantage.
We
Can you
need a
still not
closed
hear us?
captioner. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tony, we can't hear you.
Okay.
I'm using my mic.
Okay, so,
The problem is you need to know what they're saying.
it's not me.
Rosalie,
It's not-
are
can
you
we
getting
do
a good
something here?
feed?
Well, that's
I can
good.
hear everything perfectly.
Okay, so it's just the, let's see, the Irvine location. So, you know
We
what?
can set up a,
Let's do this. Let's take a 5-minute break to see if we can fix that, because there are a lot of folks that are in Irvine and
Here.
you all need to hear, okay? Sorry for that.
Davina, should we just set up a telephonic so we could all hear each other? Instead of doing depositions.
Yeah, give us 5 seconds and see if we can remedy.
Okay.
But you can hear us, correct?
I can hear you. I think the problem is the bandwidth. They're not,
The feed is
it's
slow.
not big enough.
We could mute our volumes and then do telephone, but keep the video as well, right?
That's what I think would be super smart.
So Carrie, what are you seeing or hearing right now?
We can set up a conference call.
Can we say something to you?
We're on a break.
It's really, our hands are tied.
Webcast and the meeting again. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. Technology was not on our side, but I think we've gotten back into the groove of things. Thank you, Board Member Crum, for sending us a conference number, so everybody is now connected and back on. We left off with questions. Are there additional questions from board members? I know there was a question earlier about if we were to have the makeup test at a school location, what the conflict, if any, would be. And Fred, do you have any additional comments during that time that maybe you looked into or thought about with
Yes.
regards to that?
Oh, well, one of my question is the school that will be offering the retest. Well, the location for the retest for free. Is the school one of those schools that are requesting the retest?
As I understand, yes. The request was from Sage, I believe. Ms. Fenner, you can correct me. And
The original request came from Sage. South Coast is in the room. They've offered theirs. Downey is in the room. They've offered theirs. I received an email from Humphreys, and they've offered their location as well. So we have multiple offers at this point.
So if the offers are from schools that are making the request for the retest, I see a potential conflict, or at the very least a perception of a conflict, where the school pushing for the retest is actually offering the board something. And it could be construed or interpreted as, in essence, hey, we give the board something and we get something in return. That's the public perception that I'm not saying that that's what's going on here, and I see that the schools are doing it just really for a convenience sake, but the public perception could be as such. So that's the
Can
issue
I
that's going
ask-
to raise.
Yes, go ahead.
If we had an agreement between all schools that they would agree to the location for the sake of all the students, would that cause that to still be a problem, or would that fix it?
No, I don't believe that would fix it, because that would be the perception issue. The perception of a conflict where all the schools that are pushing for the retest are now coming in and offering their location for the retest for free. In essence, the public could perceive that as the school's getting something in return. So that's where the danger lies, so to speak.
Wonder if every school offered, as they didn't, even if they didn't make a formal request to have the test retaken, but they all agreed that that would be a great way to mitigate this issue.
Is there-
I understand that that the board is trying to look at the logistics of whether or not an additional test can be scheduled, but one of the board members suggested that perhaps the cart was before the horse in this discussion. And so I would recommend that maybe you leave to the side at the moment the logistics of it to consider whether or not there's really even a basis to schedule the additional test, and then work out the logistics, because it may be a situation where if there's a psychometric significance to the events that occurred, that the board may have to schedule it whether or not there's a cost. So I might go along with the board member who suggested that the cart was before the horse, and ask the board to maybe focus on the request and what led up to the request.
So that might be a good segue to pull in one of our experts that is in the room, Tracy, I believe. I'm sorry, your last name again, Montez, to discuss the psychometric aspect of the board policy that was, if you could. If you could please, again, state your name and who you're with.
Happy to. I'm Dr. Tracy Montez, and I'm the Division Chief of Programs and Policy Review at the Department of Consumer Affairs. One of the units in my division is the Office of Professional Examination Services, and we contract with various boards and bureaus and develop their exams and provide consulting expertise on psychometric issues, which just is a nice fancy word for, testing, looking at the various variables that make what we look for a very valid, reliable, and fair examination. So I was asked to review some of the details associated with this issue, and one of the questions that I had was the validity of the test impacted? Did the board attempt to measure a skill set that was outside of the exam plan and what is associated with a court reporter's exam? And it was confirmed that no, that did not happen, that the exam was the same type of exam that has been given in the past in terms of those competencies that we measure through prior exams. And then another important question that I wanted to know about was the standardization, and that is, were the candidates treated differently? Did one group experience something different than another group at this administration? And again, it was confirmed that no, all of the candidates had the same experience. So those are two really important factors that we look at when looking at whether or not the exam has been compromised. So it appears to me, again, from what I've reviewed, that the exam is valid and that it was done in a standardized manner. Now, unfortunately, the procedure was different in terms of how the readers were positioned, but again, that does not deviate from the expectation of what happens on the job. And again, it wasn't rotated for different candidates. As far as your pass rates, trying to compare, you're really comparing apples and oranges because of what happened. There were some other variables in terms of from reading some of the candidate comments, there was some frustration. So unfortunately, you do have some variance in there that is going to impact your reliability and really trying to compare pass rates, and that's unfortunate. But again, from a psychometric perspective, it does sound like you administered a solid exam. And what I would encourage the board to do, though, is to look at that policy and consider revising it. It's important in terms of fairness to candidates to give them a reasonable expectation of what's on the exam, which is why you have your exam plan and you publish that. You also have an occupational analysis, which has created that exam plan based on court reporters. So again, lots of evidence to support the validity. But sometimes when you go into too many details, that can create problems like this, where you get candidate prep schools or even some of our training programs or schools that go into that detail and then focus on teaching to a test. And I'm not saying that these schools do, but I've seen in the past where there is a focus on teaching to a test and not the profession. And unfortunately, that can sometimes backfire on our candidates. So again, sticking with your exam plan and providing the logistics of where the exam is, how to get there, those types of things are valuable, and trying to stay away from those details. Do you have any questions?
Any of the board members? Any questions from her analysis?
I do. This is Carrie Nocella. And forgive me, I forgot your last name, Tracy. I apologize. But
Tracy's fine.
Who did you talk to when you engaged in your analysis?
I talked to Yvonne and also Dr. Linzer, who's the chief over at the Office of Professional Examination Services, and her staff that has worked with your board and the programs, and also with your legal counsel, Brad.
Did you talk to anybody who took the test?
No, I did not. I did review some of the comments. Those were shared, but I did not talk to anybody who took the test.
Any other questions?
Well, can I speak to what you just said?
So not,
Davina,
yes,
are you ready for public comment yet?
yes. So it seems there aren't any other board questions. How many folks do you have in Irvine willing to or would like to speak, so we can do a count of how much time we have?
Did you raise your hand if you're planning? Sure. Keeping their options open, it looks like 2 or 3, depending upon what comes out, but it looks like 2 or 3 from down here.
Okay, 2 or 3, and we have maybes here as well. Okay. And Board Member Crom, do you have anyone at your location?
I have nobody that wants to speak at this time.
Okay. All right, so let's start our public comments. Thank you for your comments. So moving on to the public comment section, there are a lot of maybes, no yeses. If I start at the top of maybes, we have Lori Dahl. Would you like to speak? And since we have about 5 or 6 folks, let's try to limit it to 2 or 3 minutes.
I just have one question to present on behalf of our school.
If you could, please, so we can all hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. The question that I have in regard from our school is on this particular test pass rate being so unusually low. if there will be any type of a notation on the statistics so that when accrediting agencies look at our school's performance of being able to pass licensing tests, that this test will not be counted in there without explanation on the board's behalf of why the test was such a low pass rate.
Okay. Any other comments?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think with that, we would have to investigate and could make a decision on that directly. Yvonne or Ms. Finner, if you want to add to that question.
Yeah, I wouldn't know the answer to that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would take
How we
some
would do that,
investigation. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. It's been duly noted, and we'll look into that. The next, maybe we have, yes?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have Lauren, I'm sorry. Conference call is really difficult. Lauren Soma would like to address some of the comments before we get far off the topic that we were on. Is it possible to have her go next?
And who is this individual?
She's the owner of Sage that made the initial request.
Sure, so because she made the initial request, she absolutely can add more to the request by giving testimony.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Do I speak from here?
I think you,
Okay,
you can't hear
can you all hear me okay? I don't know who to address, where to address.
Could you come closer to the phone so we can hear you better?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for having this meeting, Yvonne and others. I think it's really super important that all of us collectively, those are here physically as well as on the line or who know about this meeting. As you all well know, there's plenty of people who know about this meeting and who have very high hopes for the results that we come to today. It's unprecedented as far as I know. I mean, I've been at this a very long time, and there's never been a need for a meeting like this because historically, even though we all are well aware that these tests are very, very challenging and each school and each person has a different result, at the end of the day, overall, we feel like it's a fair opportunity to embark on this career. And we always support the board. I think that collectively the schools always support the board and say, you know what, it's a performance exam and we have different results, but at the end of the day, we believe that there's been a fair opportunity. In this particular case, as much as I respect the gal who spoke to the validity of this particular test, I understand her position and her expertise in that arena. However, being a writer and understanding what it takes to write 200 words per minute at 97.5% accuracy, sustained dictation, with all due respect, I feel like unless you've done it, you don't know what it's like. And changing those speakers is a significant difference, and it's not that we train our students for the test, it's that in a real life situation, you can't say, well, we're preparing them for the real world, because in a real world example, they have full control over the environment that they're in, and they have an opportunity to grasp where everyone is sitting and get their, speaker IDs down pat before any dictation is started. So you can't really say that the students are prepared for a test, and the sustained matter of the exam is significant in this regard. And most importantly, I think that what needs to be considered here is the fact that 67% of the test takers didn't even have their test graded. So really, without too much discussion, that's significant, and that is not acceptable, and that does not happen. So when you want to determine whether or not a retest is necessary, I think that on the side of the board, if they look at those numbers tell the story without anyone needing to sign a petition or write letters or so on and so forth. I think that you have what you need to know that the right decision is to offer these young people an opportunity to have a fair exam and to launch their career. And so that's what I'd like you to consider. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So
Next person I have on the list is Sandy Finch. Would you like to speak?
Sure, might as well.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sandy Finch, and I'm with Golden State College in Pleasanton. And I concur with Lauren from Sage, everything she said. I also want to explain further what Lori was talking about. These pass rates are going to kill us, like soon, with our accreditors. They're looking for us to meet new benchmarks of 70% licensure pass rates, 70%. And when you look at 7%, I don't know how we're going to explain this and still keep our accreditation. And this will hurt our schools, our industry. We've got to be able to make some kind of an explanation to not only ACICS, who all the private schools are accredited through, but also to the other accreditors who we may have to go to if ACICS, well, who knows what's going to happen to ACICS. We can pray. But I do want to say that I also, with respect, I heard your expert, and only thing that really caught me was the on-the-job bit. On a deposition, we don't set everybody straight in a row anyway. I mean, we always have them around us. So it isn't like an on-the-job experience. I think the students are preparing. That's one less thing they have to worry about, is having everybody just sit where I've been trained so that I can at least just shake the nerves, get that over with, and work on the words. It's an extremely difficult test as it is. So, I mean, Yvonne mentioned that, 11% was the other low test? That was terrible. I mean, these are like terrible, this is such a hard test. And it's supposed to be entry level, from what I understand, unless something has changed here through the last decade. But this is supposed to be like an entry level testing mark. Because we all know as schools that our students, and we tell them, we're going to get you launched and you have this great skill, but the first year out of school, they're still going to learn a lot. They're going to be working with firm owners like Rosalie, who's going to help and train them with other things that are happening on the job. So I hope you consider doing this, redoing it. It does leave me with one question. If the invitations go out in January, mid-January, or the notices go out mid-January, does that mean the test would be, I mean, this is, again, I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse, but assuming. If it happened, would the test be then mid-January or February, and then are we going to have March also? Or do we just like bump the whole thing up into like late January? Some options there of how we could do this. Anyway, thank you, and thanks for meeting on such short notice. We really appreciate it from the schools. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, the next person that I have on the list is Brooke Ryan. Would you still like to speak?
Sure.
Hello, my name is Brooke Ryan. I'm the president of the California Court Reporters Association. First, I would like to thank Chair Hurt, members Nchella. Where's it at? Where's it at? Is it on?
Can everyone hear Ms. Ryan?
Okay.
No. Could you use the next one?
Sure.
Thanks, since we know that works. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brooke Ryan. I'm the president of the California Court Reporters Association. I first want to thank Chair Hurt, Member Blazinski, Member O'Neill, Member Cram, and Member Nchella, and Ms. Finner. Everybody here, thank you so much for doing this in such an expeditious manner. We come to them as a support role. That's what we do. It was very hard personally to see a number of these students come out so devastated. So we're just here to tell you that whatever you do choose, whatever is the result of this, will help you in any way possible. The only other suggestion that we could possibly think of is that if this doesn't come to fruition, that maybe the fee waiver could be waived for the retest takers. All right, thank you. Thank you again for all your time.
Thank you. The last possibility is Heather Sains? Saw? No? Okay. All right, are there any other folks who'd like to speak here in Sacramento? No? So if we could move, oh, I just see a hand. Sure, if you could please come forward. Thank you. If you would like to state your name and.
Sure.
Sure.
Hi, my name's Monica Rose, and I'm a student. This was my first time taking the CSR examination. I want to thank you guys for having this meeting. I'd maybe just like to give you guys a student perspective, and to talk about, I forget what her name was, but she was saying that the test wasn't changed between, group 1, group 2, and group 3. But our testing environment was changed from just like a couple months ago to this testing environment. It completely changed what was going on in the room. It changed the way that we had to handle the whole entire test. So our testing environment was changed. So that's why I feel as though, this test was not fair. It was not fair for us. Comparatively, from 1999, when the seating standard was set, that standard was fine for everybody to be licensed, and now all of a sudden we had a different standard. It was changed for us. So that's all I wanted to let you guys know, and thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers in Irvine that would like to give any testimony?
Yes, we do have. Hello.
Thank you.
Hi there, this is Deborah Bowman. I'm Vice President of CCRA. I'm a captioner, court reporter. I've been for 20 years. One of the things I wanted to get back to is in the beginning, it's the one person's name I didn't write down, but there was talk about the setup specifically and the change in seating orders intended to make it easier, which was a comment that was made, which is fine. Board policy, though, you said, sets up the order. So there is a policy in effect by the board that sets up the order in which they are to be seated. This was changed. And I think if for no other reason, that violates policy. I'm not sure if that's enough to set up a retest, but I do think that that needs to be taken into effect with these psychometrics, because I don't obviously understand all the psychometric aspects of this, but having been a court reporter for 20 years, I can only imagine the stress that you're under. I mean, just talking to you guys right now, and I don't get nervous talking, but even just talking to you right now and imagining myself in that room and a change of order when I have been practicing specific because of the policy that's in place, that's set by the board, that's provided to the schools. So whether or not the schools are teaching to the test, they're told that this is the way it's going to be, and they're trying to make it as easy as far as calming the nerves of their students when they have them set up there, where the defendant is, where the plaintiff is, where the witness is. And I think just the mere fact that that was changed at the last minute without any preparation in the night before, when these students could have had an opportunity to perhaps, have this given to them and say, hey, by the way, they may change the seating order. Perhaps then there could be an argument for that being okay, but as of right now, I see it that there is a definite violation in policy, if indeed this is a policy of the Court Reporters Board, this seating. So that would be all I have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Finner, can I ask you one quick question before we have additional public comment? We've determined that a board policy was violated. Within that document, does it say what should happen if a policy is violated?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
Okay.
And to be clear for everyone, there's no question the policy was violated.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments in Irvine?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Comey, and I am too nervous as Deborah. I never thought I'd be speaking, but I just do feel that it's important to hear from a student that was actually there and examining. And I respect expertise that you have of the psychometric expert. But the evidence, I believe, in what you were questioning about is how did she determine this, the conclusion that she came up to. I know and I think that there are some recordings that might have happened. I do not think that she was privy to those recordings because I would disagree as being one of those and people in one of those groups and speaking to the other students in the other groups of how it also went. It was clearly not the same process in all of the same groups. There seemed to be an open forum discussion that happened to be in one of our groups that I think that was just at a disadvantage. So it even took off the timing a little bit. So I do, if the board is considering this conclusion of the expert, I hope that there might be some further evidence that she could bring and maybe look into, because I don't think she was provided enough to determine those facts, because I clearly don't think that it was the same in each one of those groups. Administratively speaking, it might have been, but not actually what happened in the actual environment itself, an assessing environment. Thank you.
Tammy, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
This is Rosalie in San Diego. When
Yes.
you use the expression open forum discussion, very quickly, can you just describe what that means?
I believe that in our group there was an opportunity, a very small window of opportunity that was misunderstood, and it became an open forum discussion. And as Deborah noted, our nerves are already at the highest when we get in there. It is a very strict procedure. We have to bring limited things into the rooms. So you already have it as, we're there for a reason. We are there to be tested. And when we get into that room, there is a very strict process in which it's supposed to happen. I think that there was about a 10 to 15 minute area in our group that it went off a little bit. Maybe it seemed 10 to 15 minutes to me and everybody else in the room, but it did feel that way. And by the time that the test actually started, everybody, you could feel the whole environment in our room changed. It was definitely different from the first experience of the CSR. Very different.
May I ask one other question, Tammy? When you say, and you use the term open forum, was it a bit, let's say, emotional?
Very emotional. I actually went into that room feeling very good. I felt like the first time I thought I had that test. And I have to say, as of a lot of students, this opportunity to test meant a lot to us in that whole group. And our nerves are already spent. We're there. A lot of us are away from home. We've had to schlep equipment halfway across the universe, it seems like, and set up. And yes, the open forum, to get back to your question, was emotional. It felt like it was a time to vent, and that was not the appropriate time to vent. The question simply, I believe, was asked, is everybody okay? I believe it was just basically, can you see and can you hear? And then it became a forum discussion about the speaker lineup. Wasn't prepared for that. I was ready to warm up and take my test. And as a test taker, I can appreciate everybody else's issue. I definitely believe that, but it wasn't the forum to discuss that. I believe that we should have been able to take the test and discuss it later and then redo this later. But it just put a lot of us in a very bad place after the test. In my test, you could see there was not one smile in the whole room after our test. The feeling was very bad. And then when I got out and saw everybody in tears, I knew I was not the only one. So
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Spinner, is there anyone else in Irvine that would like to speak? Oh,
Yes,
okay.
hi, my name is Jocelyn Epperson, and I am actually the program coordinator for Downey Adult School and Tri-Community Adult School. And I just wanted to mention the fact that as an administrator of a school or schools, the fact that I saw my students come out not completing that test, which we tell them when they go in, you are to take that test, you're to write every word, I don't care how hard it is, you take it, you come out, and you do the best you can. The fact that when I came to that lobby and saw my students standing there in tears, I've never seen anything like that before. I think the disruption of the room itself speaks volumes. The fact that we're going into a testing environment and students are disrupted and losing focus on why they're there is a big factor in what happened that day. I think that that should be taken into consideration as well. The fact that the seating was changed is one thing. The fact that students went into a room with one purpose in mind, and they got diverted by the fact that so many people were so vocal about what was going on that day, and I think we need to speak to that as well. I think the fact that students went in there thinking that they were going to sit down and take a test and then got slapped in the face with that, it's awful. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I've only been to probably maybe 4 exams in the last couple of years, a year and a half, and I've just never seen anything like it. And I think that we need to address that fact as well. That disruption caused students to lose focus because so many people were upset. People were crying before they even started taking the exam. And I know that that is not a normal scenario. So that's what I would like to address.
Thank you.
We have one more.
Okay. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Krieger with South Coast College. I'm the director at South Coast College. And I just wanted to put it out there that in 1994, the November test, there was a retest at South Coast College. Rick Black, who was the then executive president, walked into one of the dictation exams, and there was a retest in 94 of November test for one group. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And a quick question for Ms. Finner. In 1994, how many tests were given yearly? Could you comment to that? 2? Okay.
2.
And what was the reason for the test, the retest in 1994? Do you know?
Rick Black walked into the dictation.
Particular groups.
With one group, particular group, during the actual dictation
And that
test.
whole group
got a retest. They did at South Coast College in Anaheim at the time.
So on that day of testing, that group just got to test again on that date. Is that your testimony?
No, another day.
Another day.
Another day.
Okay. Ms.
Thank you.
Finner, thank you very much. Ms. Finner, I have another question. Do you know how many of the test takers were retakers? Do you have those statistics possibly? I know there's 126 folks who took the test.
No, we don't know that yet.
We don't know, okay.
Weren't there like 43 first-timers? So the rest were retakes.
I think there was 41 first-timers.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other public comments in Irvine? No? Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Yes, we have one more.
Okay.
All right. Hi, my name is Latoya Nelson. I was also one of the people to take this exam in November. I honestly feel like we were the guinea pig in this situation. The exam is 10 or 12 minutes long, but I honestly feel that we were tested even before the exam started when the speakers were changed. I actually went to school in Virginia and worked there for 4 years, so I kind of have, some experience in the real world. If we're continuing to use that phrase, in the real world, it's not like this. In the real world, I'm able to make use of the expensive Case Catalyst software that I paid for, and I'm able to, make the seating chart, and obviously you can't do that in the test. And I I just feel like I've never had to fight so hard to do what I love. Sorry. I've taken this exam before, and obviously I failed it. And usually when I walk out of the exam, I call my mom or whatever, and they always ask me how did I do. And I usually say two things: either I feel that I did really well and I know I passed, or it was a great test and it was my nerves. But this time, I felt like I didn't even have a chance, and I felt that I just felt betrayed. I don't know. I just felt that this wasn't even, I didn't have an opportunity. And thank you. Like I said, I've done this for 4 years. I've actually worked for 4 years, and I've passed the test at 225 words per minute, and the fact that I can't even pass an exam at 200 words per minute is a blow to my ego. And I was in group 3, and as you can see, based on the statistics, that energy, that negative energy, made the pass rate, decrease. It went from a 6 to a 2 to a 1. And when I was in my group, I've noticed people were crying in the negative energy, but I really didn't know what was going on. So when I was in the test, and where you take the test, the lady came in and, gave the disclaimer about the seating chart being changed and just trust me. And it's just honestly made me more nervous than I was because, people were crying and then this disclaimer was given. It's like that negative energy just kind of took over everyone. And I don't know. I just want a fair chance, and that's it.
Thank you for your testimony. So we have a few hands popping up here in Sacramento. Let me take a look here. So we really will, for these last few speakers, try to limit it to 2 minutes. So if you could appreciate limiting your comments so that we can get to deliberation and really make a decision.
No problem. Hi, my name is Courtney Albright, and I am a court reporting student. I took the test for the 3rd time in November. My first time taking it was in March, which obviously was a low pass rate, but I still did my best to try and hang on for every single word and transcribe it. July test I felt was very fair and reasonable and entry level. When it came to the November CSR, on top of being shaken up by the seating of all the speakers, I told myself that that was not going to disturb me too much, that I would overcome this. But I felt that the material and the dictation of the test was mind-blowing. There were words that were in the test that were not given to us prior. I didn't think that was fair. I felt that just the subject of the test was not anything close to what we study and prepare for when it comes to our qualifiers at school. I felt it was very fast and very dense, and I just hope that we get another fair opportunity to have a fantastic career ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Another speaker interested?
We have someone in San Diego that'd like to speak.
Do you want me to wait?
No, okay, if Ms. Crum, if you'd give us 1 moment, we have a speaker here, and after this speaker, we'll go straight to San Diego.
Hi, my name is Joanna Hashwa. I was in group 3 as well, and with the woman that spoke 2 ladies ago, the energy totally in our group was bad. You can see on our stats, that definitely brought down the test for us already before it even started. This was my first time taking it as well, so I went in there, you practice your heart out for this moment, and you think you're going to do great, and before the test even started, you failed before you heard anything. Also, the material was just not entry level. That's what we're being told when we go into these tests, and I felt it wasn't entry level. Also, in that time, we're losing so much money as students to pay to go to LA we don't have this money to keep on taking these tests, and that time that we're waiting 3 months to take another one, we're losing money. And then all of us, the people who paid for the hotels for this test, and it was a complete bust. I just really hope we can retest and something can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we can now go to San Diego, I heard that there's a speaker.
Yeah, hi, it's Mikey McMorrin. I'm a court reporter. And thank you, everybody, for your input. I'm kind of looking at it from all aspects, from the school, from the reporter, from Dr. Montez's input. And I do kind of see that it was impacted, but also why perhaps Dr. Montez did not see it as impacted, because 7% did pass, so obviously it did not impact that 7%. But to have a pass rate lower than, as far as I know, it's ever been, it's kind of hard to say that it wasn't impacted. To just kind of be brief, Yvonne stated that a policy was broken, and really what we as reporters pride ourselves on is passing a test that the integrity is not compromised. And if a policy was broken with respect to Dr. Montez's findings, it's kind of hard to defend the integrity of the test if a retest was not given. I actually do have the same concerns about holding it at a school as, I apologize, I forget the attorney's name, but from what Yolanda said, there is precedent for it, and if the precedent allows us to have a retest, certainly I do see some logistical concerns, but as a reporter, I would be all for it, and like Brooke said, I'm willing to give whatever support I can to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have one more speaker here, two more speakers here in Sacramento, and then we'll get to the board. And actually also, Ms. Montez would like to respond to some of the comments.
Can you hear me?
Yep, welcome.
My name is Jordan Berry. I chose to abandon my pursuit to become a CSR a number of weeks before the exam, but I had already paid for it and everything, so I kind of just took it for amusement purposes. And so I can confirm in Group 2 was where the open forum discussion took place, and it was asked whether it became emotional. And because I, like I said, was abandoning this pursuit, I was sort of observing it as an objective observer because I honestly didn't care at all whether I passed or not. So I kind of feel I had a unique perspective, and I can confirm it became very, very emotional. And just specifically where I was sitting, the girl directly to my left was in tears, and then also the girl in front of me to my left was in tears. And that was before the exam even started. So I just wanted to corroborate what the other speaker said, that it was a very, very emotional, and I think possibly the pass rate reflects, the descending pass rate reflects sort of how the situation evolved as it became, the issue became progressively worse as people sort of realized that there was something amiss with the arrangement of the speakers. So I just wanted to offer that perspective as someone who was as objective as one could be in such a circumstance, and just corroborate what the earlier speaker said.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker, and this will be our last one before we then go to Ms. Montez.
Hi, I'm Heather Sachs, and I just have a quick question. If the policy was in fact violated, why is the test even valid? If I violate something in the exam room, my test isn't valid and I don't get to turn it in. So if you guys violated a policy, how is it valid?
Thank you for your question.
Sutina, may I address that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the test itself was read at 200 words a minute, and it contained the correct density as far as syllabic density was. So it's been recorded, we timed it, we know that it was read properly. So the test itself met the standards. It was the location of the speakers was the only violation. I think it would do a disservice to invalidate the entire test to the people that passed it. So if you're talking about throwing the entire test out, I have a big problem with that because the material itself was read at the proper speed and contained the proper density. So for people to say it was hard or too dense, I mean, there's a syllabic density that has to be counted out. It's either there or not.
Thank you, Ms. Finner. I believe Ms. Montes wanted to respond to some of the comments and add a little bit more to the discussion before we go into board deliberation.
Okay, so I'm going to become the most unpopular person here today. I'm going to, again, echo the validity of the test. The validity of the test is based upon occupational analysis, which is the study of the court reporting profession that utilizes licensees. And that's, we do the occupational analysis, we create an exam plan, we go through a very standardized process for developing the exam, which Yvonne just confirmed. That's what makes it a valid exam. That's how we defend it in the courts, which I have done for our boards and bureaus. So I think that we're getting confused on a number of issues. We're talking about a policy that was violated, which we agree. We're talking about concerns about the reader order. We're also talking about speed and difficulty entry level. So there's a number of variables that have been discussed here. And I would just, again, redirect the board to whether or not this was a valid process and whether or not it was fair. Now, I will say that it appears for one group, there may have been some discussion that created what I would call some variance in the process that did impact some individuals. So there is some legitimate concerns here. But, and again, I know this is going to make me unpopular, but this is a licensing exam. There are expectations when you come to take a licensing exam that you are prepared for entry-level practice. You have a license and you can go out. There's expectations in the professional world. It's very different than being a student. Having gotten my PhD, I can tell you I've gone through a lot of exams, and the exams in school are very different than a licensing exam. And so, again, important to hear all of this feedback. I'm getting some very good ideas, some things that we need to have some discussions about with your board, but I think it's important to try to remove some of the emotion and focus on the facts. And again, I feel for the students. We want you to pass. We want to create a fair and valid exam. We want you out there representing the profession. But we need to make sure that we don't confound all of the emotions and the things that may have occurred and, you know, sort of a domino effect is almost what I'm hearing happened in this exam process. So, thank you.
Thank you for your additional comments. So I'm now going to close the public comment time and move on now to board member maybe additional questions, but definitely comments so we can discuss amongst ourselves what step we're going to take. And also remembering that we're here to protect the California consumer, and so thinking about this request for an emergency retest of the skills portions, you know, how is this going to protect the California consumer? So just narrowing what the discussion is truly and really about, and there as it's been stated, there are a lot of emotions involved in this, but we need to move forward on a decision about what's best for the California consumer. Is there anybody who'd like to start? I see a finger in Sacramento over here to the left of me.
I do have a question for Fred. A policy is set, it is violated. What are the legal ramifications of that? I mean, does the board have a certain, based on that, does the board have a certain path that they have to take? Is there any set, is it set out anywhere as far as how to react to that?
Unfortunately, I read the policy myself as well, and there is no provision in terms of what would happen if, let's say, the policy concerning the seating arrangement or just, how to administer the exam is violated. Whether that's, what actions the board is mandated to take. It appears, though, with the silence in the policy, it does give the board a little bit more discretion in terms of how they want to proceed. I think right now the board is confronted with an issue that where the policy was violated, and I guess the questions that are raised by Dr. Montez are very valid, which is, was this a violation that revalidated the process, and whether, was it a fair exam in essence? So
that's really a board decision.
right.
Correct.
I'm not aware of any regulation or statute that would mandate the board to take one action or the other.
So we have a follow-up question.
Well, I'm not sure it's a follow-up question, but there was a question raised by the public, that because the pass rate was so low, to have this exam invalidated or whatever, even though people did pass the exam. There were some people who passed. So if it were invalidated, would the people who passed the exam, what would be their status? I'm just asking.
That certainly would be an issue of concern where, depending on how the board looks at this issue, if the board were to determine that this examination is invalid and were to throw out the results altogether, it's possible that there may be some, especially those who have passed the exam, that they may actually are not be happy with that decision. And at this point right now, we'll be going through rounds of speculation as far as what actions they will take.
And I think that's also a step too far in the discussion,
Right.
whether we're invalidating the
Right.
exam or not. This is merely about the retesting, whether we should or not. I see Ms. Montez.
If I may, because I have to leave shortly, just offer my opinion on that. I would not invalidate the test, but the administration, those that passed, I would allow them to pass. I think that would be, that would not be fair to them, having gone through the process. And again, they were measured on those minimally acceptable competencies for entry-level practice. They have passed, therefore they should be issued their license.
I think my question was more directed because if we're thinking about retesting, then the grounds of the retesting have to be very clear, and then it leads me to ask about what happens to those who did pass. So it wasn't that I was trying to be ahead of the game. Working on the retest part and what that implies.
Okay. So, if you could continue.
Well, that was, sorry. That was my initial question, if we had, legal dictates that we had to follow. So if I understand, we can have, can we have the two-pronged in the sense of the people that have passed that test can still have, in other words, that was a valid test for them and they passed it, and then turn around and retest the people who didn't pass or didn't transcribe?
The situation right now, the statute has given the board broad powers in terms of how to administer the examination. And the question being presented, at least in my opinion, goes towards the administration of the examination. Here we have a policy of the board that was violated. As far as what the consequences are and how the board wants to deal with it, again, the law does not mandate a course of action that the board must take. So if in your situation, if the board were to hypothetically adopt this approach, I'm not aware of any type of law or regulation that would prevent the board from doing so.
Whenever you're ready, I
I'll
can
pass
follow.
on. So, is there another board member who'd like to continue on with comments? Ms. Crom?
Thank you. I have a couple of points here. First, I believe the test was valid and the people who passed it should stay CSRs, but a policy was broken, and therefore I believe it opens the door to having the test retaken. And I particularly believe Group 2 had a situation that was not typical and was not fair in many ways if people are out of control talking before the test even begins. I also believe, and speaking as a person who took that test, that I know maybe emotion is not a part of the test as far as actually the word count and how many syllables per second or whatever, but emotions are a big part of that test, and actually being a part of a court reporter in the real world. And when things are thrown out of whack to such a degree, or even to the point of speakers being in the wrong place, and I read some of the letters that were written to the board, and I don't know if that has anything to do with, some people said they couldn't hear one person or another, but the bottom line is, I think since there is precedent and using a school to help save some funds from 1994, that I would encourage or speak to retaking the test, take one of the schools' offer to host the test, and I just believe in my heart it's a fairness issue, and it makes a lot of sense just to move forward and to redo it.
If I could, Ms. Crum, just clarify. So you are suggesting having an emergency retest before the scheduled March 1?
Correct.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, please.
And then, just to clarify that suggestion, does that mean that the people who transcribed it and did not pass also get to retake the test?
Obviously I'm not Fred, I'm not a lawyer, but in my mind, I believe anybody who was at that test, and whether they transcribed it because they had some kind of hope, and I know I've done that in the past, or threw it away, they all should have the opportunity to retake that bloody test.
Just for clarification's sake, Board Member Cram, so are we talking about retesting for everyone who had a failing score, or everyone?
No, failing score.
Failing score.
Failing score. If someone passed the test was valid, as Ms. Fenner said, as far as the administration of it. It was some of the logistics that broke policy, and therefore I think as a fairness issue, the people who did not pass and wish to take it again may take it again.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak?
No, I'm wondering if. No, well, I would like to support that concept that Ms. Cram has just proposed.
So you're supporting the concept that we create another test before March for those who received a failing score?
Or didn't, there are people who didn't even finish.
Failing score or turned in incomplete?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Nocella?
So just questions of clarification. So if a retest was administered, can you walk us through again what that timeline would be and when exactly it would be available for a retest? And then if Ms. Fenner could explain the fiscal impacts. I understand she walked through the range, but if you can explain to us if that money is available in the budget and if that's something that we could accommodate. And then I guess the third subset would be, if we found out when this retest would be, would we still be offering the March test? What would be that differential of time?
I can address this. To refresh on the schedule, we do have a new wrinkle as a result of this. We would need to have Fred's research done so that we know if we can accept it from the schools, because there's a precedent and it's happened in the past. I'm not sure that that's still valid for today. I mean, we need to look at what the law is today and what the current law is as far as the conflict of interest and all of that. And that's why we do have staff counsel, and I'm sure he will do his best to get that to us as quickly as he can. But we will have to wait for that decision before we know if we can go forward with the school. If it's a yes, then we can go forward with the school. Then we need to choose schools because we now have multiple locations that have offered their locations. So the board will have to determine how we're going to decide among the schools that have offered where to have it. If the answer is no, you can't have it at a school, then we'll need to contract with a hotel. However, at that point, we know we're going forward, and we would have time to do that. I'm going to skip down to the fiscal part of that. The budget is robust enough this year that we can handle this additional expense. So we could do that. It's just the board's decision if that's the best use of that money. That's their fiduciary duty. That money, if it were not spent, would remain in the court reporter's fund. It doesn't go back to the general fund or anything like that. Then skipping back to the schedule, as soon as we know where it's going to be or what direction we're going, Ms. Kale said that she would be able to send the results out with the letter, with the special application, so to speak, so that they can reapply. That would go out, I think she said on the 16th. We would need a week for those to come back in. Then we need to create the final notices and do the scheduling, another week to get that back out to the candidates. So the very, very earliest would be mid-January, realistically the end of January, but that's what we're looking at, mid to late January. And then the last question on would we continue to have the March test then? We're under contract with the hotel right now, so there are also fiscal ramifications for canceling that contract. It does present some issues for staff as far as grading, because typically the application date is 30 days before the exam. And so we make sure we've got the grading done in time to hold an appeals meeting in order for people to know if they need to apply for that exam. Now, if 100 people take the January test, the chances of us having all of those tests graded before the application test for March would be slim. So people would probably have to apply or not apply. We would probably have to issue refunds if it turns out they passed. There's going to be a little bit of an overlap. None of that is deal breaking, but I'm just letting the board know that it does become a little bit complicated on staff side. And the other issue is, we're small, and so there will be a trade-off. Staff can do this if it's the board's pleasure. There are other things that will not happen then because we're basically dropping everything to do this. So just factors to consider, not deal breakers, just factors to consider.
Ms. Benner, with the March test that was scheduled, how far in advance do you schedule tests? Was this done a year ago? Is it held every March?
No, there are one in the spring, one in the summer, one in the fall. We like to contract out 2 years ahead of time. This particular contract is still being finished up. We're waiting for final signatures, but that would take us 2 years out.
I think just from my perspective, trying to say either or on the March test is a difficult one, because I think there are a lot of people who may not have taken this November test that's waiting for the March test. And so to say, well, it's an either or, it's not fair for folks who are waiting for the March test. So really, when we talk about this emergency retest, are we saying we're going to do 2 tests or just the March test? And if we just do the March test, are there other ways to try to remedy the situation, whether it be a waiver that I heard, or I read one comment of a woman who said she had taken it so many times, and she got to the point where after 3 years, she'll have to retake the English one and the other various tests, whether we could waive that for her and give her that March extension. So thus far, though, what I have heard is Board Member Crom wants the retest before, and the same for Ms. Lazinski. And then Board Member Nichella, or what are you thinking?
I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say. I just have a really quick question. Maybe Fred or other staff members can answer this question, but I know Ms. Hurt and I are both lawyers. We've taken the bar exam, so I'm trying to analogize the situation to if something were to happen at the bar exam, and what would be the implications to the state bar if something were to happen that was like this. Does anyone know what other agencies do on tests like this? I'm not aware of the state bar having to redo the state bar exam. I'm wondering if there's anyone that is aware of something analogous.
I'm not with the bar. Yeah, it's yes or no. Yes or no. This which no, okay. It seems no one here has any information, unfortunately, to that point. I think, to be really clear, this board is taking full responsibility that a policy was violated, you know. But the integrity of the examination, at least from my perspective, I would not go as far to say that this exam wasn't solid, because there were some folks who did pass, and we have to acknowledge the good work that they did on that. But I respect the fact that there's a sizable portion who didn't, and then I also hear that some people didn't even finish the test. They just walked out. And that, I think that has a lot to do with the emotions and high emotions. We've all been there. As Ms. Nichella stated before, I took the bar exam, 3-day test. That is a stressful situation. And so I understand that those changes really drove a lot of difficult emotions and made it an environment that was not terribly conducive. So what is the true remedy to that now that the test is over? Now that there's a holiday, now that it's January, and we're looking to the end of January, and then we run up against a March testing. I think from my perspective, I also thought about, is everybody in the right mindset to practice and get ready for this late January, start February test? There's a reason why we separate tests, to give you time to prepare from that. And I hear a lot of emotions. I know the holidays are coming up. Is everybody going to sit and study and prepare to the degree that they're going to do? I don't know.
I appreciate your concern, but we can't hear.
I know that costs and the stress of this time is a lot, and there's a lot of emotions, but I want folks to keep in mind what we're going to be asking of the board, to try to slide in an additional test and also prepare for a March test, and what that means cost-wise, what that means emotionally for the students that will prepare for that test, and what that does for the California consumer and what we're protecting and what benefit they receive with that additional test. And just one more thing, I've heard a lot about, like, it's a difficult standard. California has a high standard. There's no doubt about it. We're highly trained professionals. It translates into the California bar. It's one of the hardest bars as well. So this is not unique to court reporters and the testing and low scores. There's low scores this year in the bar exam as well. It's a difficult test, but I think we need to keep in perspective that you continue to study smart and hard, I know you've probably been told over and over, you reap what you sow, but practice, practice, practice at this stage, and maybe an additional month or so will get you ready for the March tests. I can foresee waiving those fees, but having a test prior, I'm still on the fence about.
Okay, so one of the consumers that we do have are students. They are consumers that are part of our charge as well. And I think from the point of view of the students as consumers, I think we have to make it right for them too. Something that I am not clear is if we do offer this exam in late January, it is only going to be open to those students who took or were present at the November test. It will not be open to broadly to other test takers who are going to take it in March. I'm not clear on that part.
I think that's something we can determine as a board,
Yes,
so that's
I'm
open, so that's
throwing
one of your
that out
issues.
there.
Okay.
But I think we do have to consider the students as part of our consumer base.
Davina, this is Yvonne. If I could just clarify that for Ms. Lisinski, we could not offer it to people who are planning to do it in March. Because of the logistics of creating the final notices, we're basically going to reuse a lot of the information from applications, including the passport photos that are required. We really aren't geared to then add on additional people and do that. It would have to be open only to the people who took this test and were not successful.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. I just wanted it clear in my head who the population was going to be for this exam, and then potentially for 2 months later for the March exam, trying to get my head into who's going to be at the March exam then. All right, thank you.
So if I could maybe help the board a little bit focus the question. From what I've heard, you have expert testimony that the exam was valid. You also have testimony that, or some evidence that there was a difference in the practice, and I'm going to call it a practice, whether or not it's in board documents, it labels it a policy. It really is just a practice that may or may not be included in an exam handbook. It's there's not a value judgment behind it. So to that extent, I don't think that's really a practice. Or whether or not, a policy. So whether or not there was a difference in practice this time, the board would, I think, be determining whether or not the change in that practice made the exams sort of significantly sort of disadvantaged those test takers in a significant way that would lead the board to say that they're entitled to a retest. If that's the case, at this point, I think that if you're doing that, you would have to recreate the circumstances, meaning it was a Northern California test, was it not? So I think it'd have to be in Northern California, because otherwise you're taking a test that people may have scheduled themselves for the convenience of being in Northern California, say, hey, we're going to help you out, but now we're going to have it in Southern California. So I think you would have to essentially recreate the circumstances of that test. And I think the question about whether or not you'd allow other applicants is a good one, and Ms. Fender is saying that the logistics are such that the board would not be in a position to really even allow new applicants at this time. And then the question would be whether or not the board thinks that the change in the practice is significant, not only to allow to set a new test and allow a new test or an additional test, but also to waive the fees for that test. So I don't know if that helps at all, to offer that in a way that it's really a practice that was changed. Whether or not that practice should be part of the test setup is something that the board will probably consider at a later time. But I caution away from saying that there's this policy violation, because it's not, I don't think it was a policy set with, as far as I know, I wasn't around at the time, policy set with some intention behind it, that there's some value behind, some value judgment that was made in order to put that in place. So I'm offering that. I don't know if that helps at all, sort of lead you down one path or another.
Thank you. So just to recap, we have 2 members suggesting retest before March. At this point, I'm suggesting not a retest, but a waiver of fees and some of the other points that I noted. Board Member Nocella or anyone else like to chime in? Yeah. Okay.
Turn this on. To follow up on one of the points that you made the comment that the retest would have to be, the test would have to be the same. I'm not saying the actual dictation, but the process. So I take that to mean that the order of speakers at this test we're talking about has to be the same in the retest. In other words, the big issue here was the speakers.
Right, no, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that.
Okay.
What I meant to say is that while the offer of the schools in Southern California to provide a site for it is very generous, I think that if you are truly trying to say those students who took it were so disadvantaged that the board really is, I don't want to say mandated, because there's not a statutory regulatory mandate, but you feel compelled to do that it should be under the same circumstances, meaning in Northern California, in Sacramento.
So in other words.
Because people scheduled themselves for a reason there, and I think it would be inconsistent to say we want to help you, but then tell people, yes, we know you may have scheduled it to be in Northern California, but now we're going to have it in Southern California. So I'm trying to say, I think that if the board is going that way, is going to determine that there's a significant disadvantage that compels the board to say you should be entitled to retest, that it should be under at least under the same circumstance, that it's in the same location geographically, but not, obviously it can't be the same test. That would.
Well, no, I wasn't talking about the actual dictation part of it, but what I was interpreting from your remarks is that this retest should essentially replicate the whole process, because that's what the people who passed it was subjected to. And this is, just like they were subjected to, he had to come to Northern California. So I just needed that clarification.
That's not what I meant to suggest.
Okay.
If the issue is that the board feels like the change in the order of the speakers is what disadvantaged those applicants to the point that it is compelled to re-give the test, I would think that you'd want to correct that practice and return to the former practice. Because otherwise, I don't think it makes sense to say that change in that practice disadvantaged everyone to the extent that the board's mandated to re-give it, and yet we're going to, at this time, before the board re-looks at that practice, we're going to maintain that same change up in the practice.
My observations on this is that, and it took me 3 times to pass the test, and number one, and it's been said here, the only issue is this practice of the speakers. I've been a reporter for 35 years. You always have, this was a horrible test, this was a really hard test, these were the really easy words, these were really hard words. The second test that I took and did not pass was it was a general consensus, it was a really hard test. my two friends passed, I didn't. You know, so it isn't a really hard test for some people. So I'm not even considering that aspect of it. The other issue that I'm struggling with is the logistics. It almost sounds to me that we have the retest, a month or so before the March test. It really turns out that it's going to be I'm getting the impression, and you know, Vaughn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the people that take the retest will not be able to take the March test. Is that correct?
They will, but they won't know. They'll have to
Oh.
apply for it, not knowing if they pass the January one or not, because we may not have it graded.
I see. Okay.
I mean, there's definitely a logistics
Yes.
issue for me that really strongly, in my opinion, suggests trying to remedy this by having the March test day as is and waiving the fee for those folks that took this past test. For that mere reason, we're talking about the holidays, and we're also talking about the fact that another test is right around the corner. So.
Yeah, and that really has, you gelled what I was thinking also.
This is Rosalie, may I say something?
Sure.
I understand that logistically it might seem like there's just two tests right in a row, but at the same time, this other test had people that I think had a situation that in some ways was unfair just because of the open forum discussion, which is not typical, as well as the practice of the speakers. And having gone through court reporting school, I remember memorizing the speakers and where my hands were going to be on the keys, and those speakers go there, and this is an entry-level test. And in court, the speakers are all in the same place, and that's pretty much what is mimicked as far as where the speakers speak on the four voice. But I still would suggest we retest in Northern California, waive those fees. Only the participants that can take the test are those who did not pass and wish to take it again. Put the people in the speakers in the spots that are taught in school and has been in the practice, typical for years. And let's not discuss right now as far as cost or if it's at a school or if it's at a hotel, but just in my mind, the first thing is to decide whether or not to retest, and then we can talk about where it can be and let Fred do his work. That's all.
So, we've heard from the board in order, I'm sorry. Carrie or Ms. Nocella has asked questions. Would you like to add any additional comments?
No, look, I admittingly believe that this is a hard issue for sure. I understand that if folks are going to retest, they feel fully committed and prepared to do so for a January test. I am of the mindset that if we do move forward and retest, it has to be the same exact situation that we tested in at the beginning, which is in Northern California at a hotel. I'm not supportive of a fee waiver. So I'm really, I'm the issue of retest I'm really struggling with right now. And I'm interested in more board comments because that will help me, obviously. And then I do want to say that going forward in January, I know this is totally down the line, but this is a discussion we're having is what does that test look like, and is it permissible going forward to move the positions of folks? Because I've been in the bar exam is a pretty unpredictable situation where I've felt like I've been wronged before too, and I'm not aware of the state bar redoing the exam for when I felt wrong. I passed, but when I felt wrong. So I struggle with that belief, if you will.
So we're gonna have to make a decision today. So far, we've heard 2 retake, 1 not. Would someone like to make a motion and we take a vote, since we still have 2 kind of open decisions?
Why don't I
Makers?
make a motion and people can decide if they want to vote yes or no?
I'm sorry, restate the motion?
No, I haven't said it.
Oh.
I'm offering a motion.
You're offering a motion. What's your motion?
My motion is to retest in Northern California, waive the fees. The only participants who can take that test are those who did not pass the November 2016 test and wish to take it again. And the speakers will stay in the spots that historically they have sat in.
When you say retake in Northern California, in the hotel, or are you leaving that open?
I'm leaving that open because if Fred says we're allowed to use the school and we can save that money, why not?
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Does anybody want to second it?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Public comments?
This is Carrie. I have discussion around and this is just perspective that I'm interested in from some folks maybe who have taken the test on the board. But if you change up a location from a hotel room to the school, does that give somebody a different perspective when taking the test? And does it give the students of that school a competitive advantage of comfort?
That's my worry.
Yep.
And actually, I agree. I think the site needs to be a Switzerland, where it's neutral territory, because you are going to have some students that said, well, these students passed it because they go to this school and they're real comfortable here. And I don't want to have this discussion again. So
Okay, then I agree with Tony.
So would you like to amend your motion to say retake in Northern California under hotel conditions?
In a similarly situated hotel.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
I am also struggling with the fact that there are people that did pass it, and passed it in the order that the speakers were in that weren't the same order as the previous tests. And I really think, to be fair, it has to be a replication. That's all I'm going to say.
Excuse me, Board Member O'Neill, just for clarification purposes, so everything the same, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Everything's the same.
My only issue with that is we're doing replication of something that is considered to be wrong as practice.
Yeah.
That is not correct. So.
I mean, that's the complexity, I think, about this subject, and why really, I'm gonna vote to hold this off to our January meeting so we can discuss and get into the policy, and folks can retake the March test, and there's time to really make amends on truly remedying what has happened. I don't think we're going to do it justice by having a test prior to that. That's my opinion. So there's a motion on, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, go ahead.
No, I have nothing to say.
Okay, so we have this motion on the table. It's been seconded. Is there any further discussion on the topic before we take a roll call vote?
Yes, Rosalie, I'm wondering if you'd accept a friendly amendment for support of your motion in exchange for not a fee waiver.
People pay twice. So the people that took the test will pay twice.
I'm sorry?
So basically, you're saying that the people who already paid the fee once, they're going to pay it again?
And what's the cost of the fee?
And we're,
I think it's
right.
$25.
$25, all right, then I'll take your friendly amendment for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a friendly amendment to eliminate the waiver of fees. So just for clarity's sake, for Ms. Bruning and everyone, could you say your motion one more time? Just repeat it quickly, Ms. Crom.
I just lost it.
Oh, I can help you.
Yes, please help me.
So if Ms. Bruning could give a summary, and we'll make sure it's exactly what she has written.
Ms. Crom moved to retest in Northern California for only the people who failed the November 2016 exam. Speakers would be in their historical spots. Location would be at a neutral location as if a hotel, and the amendment was to not include the waiver of fees.
Can I?
Exactly.
So you seconded.
Well, I did, but now you're adding, so there are people who didn't complete the exam, which is not the same as failing it. Correct. So how do they fall into this
If they didn't
definition?
complete it, they failed it.
I'm sorry?
If they did not complete it, they failed it.
Oh, you're putting it all in the same category, okay.
Sorry, you still okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just for, maybe just for sake of just, make it a little bit easier, maybe to break down this motion to two motions. The first one would be to whether the board would like to have a retest, and then if the answer is yes, then the second motion would be to maybe, the retest shall be at a location Northern California that will not be a school, and, I'm sorry, and then, applicants have to pay still responsible for payment of the fee.
Okay,
Something to that
so,
effect.
so if someone would be willing to take that motion off the table.
Excuse me, Davina.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
We are under real time pressure. Is there really a need to break it down? Is there a division on the board on this vote? I'm not hearing that.
If the board would like to go ahead and vote on that motion, I don't see a problem with it. It was just mostly just to help maybe make it a little bit more clear, that's all. But I
Okay.
think we got the gist of it.
Okay, thank you. So it is true, we're under time pressure for the other location. We have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. There's been discussion. I think it's time to move on to the roll call. Are folks ready for that?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could, please, Ms. Bruning.
Ms. Crom,
Yes.
Ms. Lisinski,
Yes.
Ms. Nocella,
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill,
Yes.
Ms. Hurt,
No.
motion carries.
So, if we move to agenda item 3, which is public comment on items not on the agenda, do we have any in any of the locations? No? Okay.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. One point I just quick want to make for future thought processes. I'm not sure I can, I know tests are probably given at universities or school settings all the time. I don't think that's the issue as much as I think where the schools are offering the setting for little or no cost, and the schools are approved by the board, that's where I think the problem comes in. There's a conflict issue, not so much a fairness issue, because I think exams are given in school settings all the time. So
Thank
just
you.
for future reference.
Thank you for your comment. So let's adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for being present.
The host has left the meeting. So at this time, the meeting will come to an end. Thank you and goodbye.